From relaxing some ball handling penalties to changing the very design of the clubs themselves, here are some of the biggest changes we've seen in the rules of golf over the last decade. And I've got to start with a pretty recent golf controversy. You might have heard that in March of this year, the R&A and United States Golf Association suggested changes in the rules. The issue in question is the distance that golf balls are allowed to fly at elite tournaments. If the changes go into effect, then starting in 2026, there will be a hard cap on the distance a ball can go from one hit. That cap being set at 14 to 15 yards for the longest hitters with the fastest club heads. These changes are a response to steady increase in the length of golf hits over the decades, which has forced golf course developers to make bigger and longer courses. With the recent controversy about how much water golf courses use, this is a change that non-fans of golf could probably get behind, but pro golfers are a lot less happy about these artificial limitations on what they can do. Justin Thomas told reporters that R&A and USGA are trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, famous long hitter Bryson DeChambeau suggested the solution to this issue isn't imposing a limit on players.
A couple of them probably. Trying to hit a hard draw. And there's a false.
But instead, changing the way courses are designed. On the other hand, players like Padraig Harrington sympathize with the environmental concerns, and they look forward to older courses becoming viable again.
Another great birdie chance just off the left slightly.
He's holding some good putts.
From here, I'm going to travel back in time. How many of you remember the golf revolution of 2017? In the midst of that year's golf season, the World Golf Championship announced an overhaul of the rules of the game. It was the opinion of the WGC that golf has become too archaic a sport and hard for people to follow.
But you would think this could be too much.
They wanted to make the game a faster and more watchable experience. That wound up ticking off some golf fans, who were clearly happy with the way things were. This bunch of rules ultimately removed a lot of penalties and sanctions. For instance, there were no more penalties on moving the ball, or ball marker, or hitting something with the ball, or a player's caddy marking or lifting the ball on the green. Rules were also relaxed on players touching the sand of a bunker when the ball is inside it, and dropping the ball in relief areas. Cutting down rule disputes by getting rid of the rules altogether was an interesting choice. While the game has grown in the years since then, it's hard to say if the rule changes contributed to that. And there was another major change just a year prior, actually. That had to do with the design of golf clubs. Athletes obviously leverage their physical abilities to be successful, but being victorious means finding and exploiting every possible edge you can.
5 or 6 feet. That sounded a bit odd.
It sounded slightly heavy, didn't it? But it's not. It's beautiful.
In the golf world, that was happening in a very literal sense, with the controversial bomb and gouge strategy, a technique that plagued golf in the 2000s. Bombing is the strategy of just smashing the ball as far as you can. If that ball ends up landing in the rough, no problem. You can just go out of your way to rescue the ball from the rough, or to put it another way, gouge it. It's a pretty inefficient style of play, but the grooves on the edge of club heads back in the day made it viable for the best of the best. Back then, though, it was considered to be against the spirit of the game.
Third.
Yeah, whole location on 31 paces, so it's a shot close.
In 2010, the Pro Golfers Association mandated a change in the design of those grooves. As of 2016, all clubs have to match the new design requirements, making bombing and gouging way harder. Did that stop the practice entirely? Unfortunately, no, but it isn't as prevalent in modern golf anymore, which leads me to another broadly popular rule change. Altering the wind rule was something that was way overdue when it finally happened. It's been basically a decade since this rule was finally updated, but newer golf fans might be surprised by this bizarre rule that used to exist in golf.
Tee shots in the water. You
Keith's already chipped up close. This is be big to save a par. Oh man, everything's good.
Basically, when a player puts their club on the ground before the ball, that's called addressing the ball. The rule I'm talking about used to be that if the ball ever moves at all after the ball is addressed, that's a penalty. I'm assuming that the intent behind this rule was to prevent players from moving the ball by tapping the ground. But players would get penalized, even when the ball would move for natural reasons, like the wind. Still, that rule stuck around for a good long time, and it wasn't until it caused a major controversy that it was finally updated. At the 2011 Zurich Classic, Webb Simpson was within striking distance of victory. All hopes were dashed, however, thanks to a wind rule penalty. That was the last season the old wind rule was in effect, as the USGA was quick to act. Nowadays, it's no big deal if your ball is moved by external forces after you address it. You just have to play it from the new spot. Let's head back into murky waters now. I'm going to be talking about the anchoring rule. Sometimes you have to rule on the most minor things. But even by that logic, the anchoring rule might be a little too technical. There used to be a time when players would try to maximize the accuracy of their putt anchoring the club. Basically, they would sort of support the club or their arms by bracing them against their body. That would allow them to more tightly control the swing of the club. Anchoring the putt became key to the 2011 PGA Championship victory of Keegan Bradley, as well as Webb Simpson's win at the 2012 US Open and Adam Scott's triumph at the 2013 Masters. No one really had a problem with this until the USGA did. After the 2013 season, they changed the rule to ban the practice of anchoring. According to USGA's executive director Mike Davis, the reason for doing so is basically the spirit of the game. He felt that golf had emerged over the past 600 years as a game where you grab a club with two hands and free swing it away from your body. I guess he didn't like the idea that a sport can evolve naturally over a period of 6 centuries. I've got one last rule change for you today, and it's pretty different from the rest. Most of the rules we've seen today had to do with the game as it's played on the course. But here's a fun fact from the history of the sport. Well, I say history, but this practice was only banned in 2017. Let me ask you this. Can you think of a sport in which people watching on TV could call in and whine about their perception of the rules? You'll be amazed to know that golf was just such a sport. Audiences could report what they thought were rule infractions by phone or email, as if they were tipping the police off to a crime or something. I'm sure you can imagine that this led to some controversies. The controversy that killed this practice, though, was the one that cost Lexi Thompson a win at the 2017 ANA Inspiration.
Lexi Thompson's outside hopes of winning were concerned. It was some run.
As she was about to close the final round of the match, she was suddenly informed of a 4-shot penalty from the 17th hole. Someone had sent an email to the organizers letting them know that she had incorrectly marked her ball on the 17th green. She went from a comfortable lead to losing it all. And this practice went from being allowed to being banned from January 1st, 2018. And those are all the major golf rule changes I have for you today.